I'm Dan Drake. This is Front Up on Geno TV and Channel 99. We have as our guest Thomas Lengyel, who is the Associate Pastor of Summer Street Church. You've been here about a year now, Thomas.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And could you tell us a little bit about your background and what ended up bringing you to Nantucket?
Yeah. Well, it's really been quite a journey. I'm originally from San Diego, California, and so I'm really from the opposite corner of the country. And so it's been a long journey getting here. We left San Diego about 2.5 years ago so that I could pursue some school at Duke. Well, more like 3 years now, almost. And I finished my coursework for that program in North Carolina, and I felt like the church that I was at wasn't a very good fit. So we began to look for church opportunities in other areas, and the Northeast was always really intriguing to us, especially coming from San Diego, where the majority of weather in San Diego is sunny and steady all year long. We were looking for an opportunity to experience the seasons and experience an area of the country that we hadn't been to yet. So began to look for jobs in the Northeast and came across a job posting for Nantucket. And if I were being honest, I'd have to say I had to look it up on a map to know exactly where it was. But the idea of living on an island,
the first one.
yeah. But the idea of living on an island was so intriguing, and having the opportunity for really an adventure out at sea was something that really excited my wife and I.
Has it lived up to your expectations?
You know what? It really has. It has. We've loved it here. The culture is great. The people are great. In a lot of ways, actually, Nantucket is very similar to San Diego. Sort of a beach culture, working class culture, laid back people, people who find a good, healthy rhythm to life. And so it's felt really comfortable to us.
You've been spending a lot of your time working with young people, have you not?
Yeah, yeah.
How I won't ask you how they've responded to you, but I'll ask you how you've done this before elsewhere. Are there differences, or are they pretty much the same everywhere?
You know what? There are a lot of similarities, I think. Teenagers are teenagers, you know. I think that they deal with a lot of the same issues. They deal with a lot of the same transitional life transitions. One of the things that I see a lot of kids on Nantucket dealing with, though, is alcohol and drug problems. And I think at a higher rate than some of the other areas I've worked with. I've been sort of surprised to see what percentage of youth seem to be dealing with those issues. But there are good and bad things about every place and situation.
What about the support systems here for kids who get involved with that? Obviously, you're involved somehow in a handoff or whatever in some instances. Are the support systems here pretty good, or are they?
Yeah, you know, I think that the support systems actually are really good. I think that there's a culture with the youth of feeling like there's an expectation that they're going to get involved with those things, alcohol or drugs, at some point. So I think that the support systems are there for the youth who want it, but for the youth who don't want to take advantage of those support systems, they're always going to find a way to sort of get involved in things they shouldn't be getting involved with.
What do you think? What do you think the impact of the legal? None of us really know what the impact of legalization of marijuana is, but I would suspect that some of the kids are looking forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure they are. Well, I think one of the benefits of legalization is the opportunity to sort of control how it gets distributed. So I think that
that doesn't really make much difference with alcohol, does it?
No, I think that there are still going to be kids who are going to find ways to use it. But I think what it does do is it sets the expectation in the bar that substance shouldn't be used until a certain age. So although there are going to be kids who are going to find ways to get a hold of things like marijuana and use it, I think for a lot of kids, even though there are kids who drink earlier than the age of 21, there is at least the standard that they shouldn't drink until 21. Whereas with something like marijuana, before it's been legalized, there's no expectation. You know, if they want to smoke it at 15, they can smoke it at 15. But at least kids will begin to grow up with the expectation that they can't use it until a certain age. And I am optimistic that will be helpful to some people.
What are some of the other issues that the kids are dealing with these days?
You know what? One of the things that has really been a surprise to me on Nantucket is the overwhelming list of responsibilities that kids have these days. You know, in other parts of the country that I've worked in, youth are always busy. They have sports, athletics, church, family obligations. But on Nantucket, it's ramped up to, the maximum. These kids have 2 or 3 sports they're involved with. They have social clubs. And one of the things that I've sort of been disappointed with is the level of pressure that is being put on these kids to achieve both school achievements, also social achievements, in order to get into a good college and have a bright future. As if kids can't have a bright future if they're not valedictorian, playing 3 sports and involved in everything they can find. So I think that kids need space in order to be healthy, need space to decompress and find their own healthy rhythm to life. And I find it hard to meet with these kids once a week. They have so many obligations between their social life and school. And I think that that's leading to a lot of things like depression and anxiety, because these kids
over-programmed and pressured.
Yeah, these kids are just not emotionally equipped to deal with this many pressures. And I think sometimes we underestimate the amount of stress that puts on teenage kids. They say that kids by the age of 15 can experience the full range of emotion, but they're not really mature enough to deal with those emotions until their early 20s. So they have this terrible period from their mid-teenage years to their early 20s where they're experiencing a full range and depth of human emotion, but they're not equipped to deal with and manage those. And I think sometimes we underestimate that as adults.
Do you think that the culture here, if you will, of parents working a couple of jobs and so forth plays a role in that too? Partly in the programming and the pressure, but partly in the lack of, for a better term, guidance, time for guidance, time for interaction and so forth.
I think that does play a part. I think what plays more of a part, though, is the social pressure within the community. Families comparing themselves to other families, parents comparing themselves to other parents. I think there's a strong sense on Nantucket that if your child isn't involved in a travel sport, or if they can't afford, the newest sports equipment, that you're not doing your job as a parent. So I think one of the biggest pressures is not so much that they're not around to do the guidance, it's that they're being pressured to offer guidance in ways that they might not naturally do it if there weren't social pressures.
And because it's a small community, those pressures are much more focused.
Yeah, everybody knows what's going on all the time, and so there's an overwhelming sense that you have to provide what your neighbor's providing. And in a place like Nantucket, where the cost of living is so expensive, that puts an immense amount of pressure on people who are regular working class people to afford a life that they wouldn't feel pressure to on the mainland.
Interesting. What other sorts of impressions do you have of the island and its people?
One of the things that surprised me about coming to Nantucket was, before we came here, we heard about the wealth on Nantucket. We heard about the culture during the summer of yachts coming in and tourism and expensive housing. And so when we came here, we expected to find a lot of really wealthy, established, upper class families. And one of the things we've been surprised by is that the vast majority of people that we interact with on a daily basis are normal working class people. In San Diego, there are pockets of extreme wealth. And when you go to those places like Coronado or La Jolla, there are expensive homes and wealthy people living in those expensive homes year round. But on Nantucket, the majority of people we deal with on a regular basis are people just like us.
The year-rounders.
Yeah, and you know what? That's been really refreshing, because you sort of get the life of the wealth and the upper class in the environment, but you get the common people to deal with on a daily basis.
Interesting. Obviously, you're here because you're a minister and because you have a message that you want to share with people. Going forward, or no, not going forward, but do you find this community generally receptive to the message? Obviously, people go to different churches for different reasons, and some don't go to church at all. But is Nantucket similar or different from the other communities you've been in terms of the receptivity?
I think that it's I think it's about average in my experience, in the sense that, the Northeast is sort of painted, at least in other parts of the country, as sort of being this cold center of atheism, anti-religion. And so I sort of came with the expectation that it might be a little bit harder to connect with the community. And I've been surprised to find that has not held true in my experience, that there are really a lot of people here that are open to the idea of the church being a positive place in the community. What I think, the reason why I think the Northeast gets that reputation is because I think people in the Northeast don't hold back from sharing their opinions.
And I just witnessed that.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes gets mischaracterized as being anti-religion, because at times people in the Northeast can be critical of aspects of religion and of the church. But to be honest with you, I think that in a lot of cases, they're right to be critical of the positions that they're criticizing. And so, whereas if you're living in the South, for example, you're going to be living in a culture in which the church is a much more a part of the culture, and people are less likely to speak out against things when the church is taking a position that is controversial. But I actually like the Northeast because I like that people speak their mind, because I feel like if we're not speaking our mind, we're not getting anywhere. Let's just put it on the table and let's figure it out. And the truth is, the church is going to be controversial on some issues, and that's just the case. And you can either take it or leave it. And that's the choice that you have to make. Are you going to accept the church's positions on things, or are you going to reject them? But at least let's be honest about where we stand. And that's one thing that I've found, is that people are willing to be honest. And if you're honest with them, they're willing to connect with you.
Well, that's great.
So I feel optimistic and positive.
On that note, I'm going to say thank you. Wish you well, and hopefully we'll get you back again.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
For another perspective. Thomas Lengyel, thank you very much.
Thank you.